Okay, so today we're snowed in and I'm going to make some bread. I'm going to use a recipe for Better Homes and Gardens and see how this goes. Okay, so first we've got 1 packet of yeast, which is about 2 1/4 teaspoons, with 2 1/2 cups of flour, which we sifted. It's a good idea to sift that when you make bread. And we're going to combine that and set that to the side. So we'll come back to that here in just a second. Okay, so we're going to set that flour and yeast aside. We're going to take about 2 1/2 cups of milk and let that start warming on the stove. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar to the milk. There's 2 tablespoons of sugar. We need about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. There's about 1.5 teaspoons there, and a tablespoon of butter, which is right there. And we just want it to be warm enough for the butter to just melt, not enough for it to boil or anything like that. So we're just low to medium heat and just watch for right as the butter melts, then we should be done with that. Just stir that around real good. While that's heating up, I'm going to go ahead and sift the rest of this flour. I've got 3 1/2 to 4 cups of flour here. Now we're going to come back to this whenever we're turning the dough out. But I'm just going to sift that out to make sure it's real nice and fluffy. So. Last few remaining lumps there. All right. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a minute. Okay, the butter is melted, so I'm going to go ahead and add it to the flour and yeast. Make sure that we set aside earlier. And that, I'm going to just kind of give it a brief stirring there, and then we're going to have this mixed over the next 30 seconds or so on the low. So just use a stand mixer there and beat that. Of course, you want to scrape that as you're going frequently to keep it from sticking to the walls. After about 30 seconds, I'm going to switch that to high and leave it there for about 3 minutes. While that's mixing, I'm going to try to put as much of the other flour into the mix as I can get in there, and then we're going to turn it back out into this pot. Let's get this thing out. Okay. So, it's starting to thicken up quite a bit. I still add a little bit more of that flour. You can really smell that yeast working. Okay, now it's starting to climb, so that's about as far as we're going to be able to get there. I'm going to turn this off while I get that out of the pan and put it in here to the flour. We're going to turn the rest out. Okay, so I got it, the dough in here. I'm going to try to hold it up so you can see a little better. It's really sticky. All the flour is actually underneath the dough, so I'm working it to try to get that flour mixed in real good there. We want to keep it somewhat light, that way our bread isn't too stiff. This process takes just a couple. In theory it does anyway, if I can get it congealing. Okay, I'm going to have to add just a little more flour. I've got some more flour here to kind of dry that up just a little bit. Got a little carried away with the milk, I think, and so my dough is just a little too wet to work with. So, anyhow. Okay. I'm starting to make a little bit of a difference there. So this part, you want to knead this for roughly 6 to 8 minutes until you get a good smooth ball. You want the consistency not to be too lumpy, not too sticky. You don't want to make it too hard though. You want to make sure you don't over flour it. Mine's almost at where I want it. Still sticking just a little bit. So fold it over, push it down, and give it a quarter turn, and repeat. Okay. All right. So now we've got a ball. My dough looks pretty much like I want it to look. Alrighty, so I'm going to pause here and be back in just a second. Okay, so now to let the bread rest for about 10 minutes. Put it aside there. All right. Go ahead and get a clean towel here. Set that over it. The dough actually needs to rise about 30 minutes, so I'm going to put it right there. And to help it out, I'm going to put it in a good environment with no draft. I'm going to use the oven. It doesn't have to be on. Actually, we don't want it to be on. And I'm going to put a bowl of water in there as well to keep the environment from being too dry. You really want something about 80-85 degrees. So, I've got that water in there. So that should take care of itself there. So we'll come back in about 30 minutes. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes. So I'm going to get my dough out. Hopefully it should have gotten a little bit bigger here. So you can see it's kind of grown a little bit, double in size roughly. Take that bowl of water out while I'm thinking about it. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to punch it down. It's started to rise a little bit. So we're going to have to kind of turn it out like we did before. That'll make things a little more workable. So we're going to do this just a little bit, and we're going to divide it up into 2 halves and let it rest for about 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. Okay, got that turned out. Put it back in here, let it rest for about 10 minutes, and we'll be back. So, now we need to take two different bread pans. I've got a glass one here and a metal one, and we need to grease them, not real heavy, just enough so that the bread doesn't stick. So you can just do that with your hand or a paper towel or whatever you want to do. I like to use Crisco. I suppose you could use butter if you wanted or whatever, but we're going to make it to where they don't stick. Same thing on this one. About the time I finish this, we should be ready to work the dough one more time. Okay, so we've got our Crisco. So now let's check on our dough. Okay. So you can see they're kind of swelling up a little bit. We're going to work them one at a time. We want to roll them out into squares about 12 by 8. So here's my first. So fold, push. Okay. Let's see how well we can get this worked here. So there's my roll. I pinch it on the ends and bind up the seam. So I pinch it all the way down it. And put it seam side down in the bread pan here. That's what we're looking for. So you see it there. And we're ready to go. Now, we want this to rest about 30 minutes. Let it rise for 30 minutes before we cook it. We're going to have the oven preheated to 375, so that might be a good time to do this. Okay, got the bread back, and so you can see it's doubled in size here. And I'm going to go ahead and bake it now for 25 minutes, and then I'm going to cover it with foil and then bake it another 10. That's just to keep it from over browning. So, oven's at 375. We're putting it in. And we'll be back in 25 minutes. So it's been 25 minutes, so now I'm going to get the bread out. Let's see how it's looking. Got something there. Better get a hot board. And so here we go. Nice loaf of bread. I'm going to cover this with foil to keep it from burning. Let's make a little lid for it here. Got about 10 more minutes to go. And we'll have fresh bread ready to go. Alright. Okay, so the timer's gone off and the bread should be ready, so hopefully it's not burnt. Let's see what we got here. I wish I could translate the smell. Everything smells really good in here right now. So even if it's terrible, at least it makes your house smell good. Hey, not bad. So, turn the oven off before I forget. So here we have it. Loaf of bread. Also cool that on a wire rack. So we're going to go ahead and get the bread out. It slides right out. So here's our loaf of bread. And same with that one. And just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and cut into it a little bit. So you've got fresh homemade bread.